Well, let me show you what I'm up to today. I'm out here in the yard, and I'm standing near this pile of Atlantic white cedar that I've got here. I don't want to call this pile scraps at all, because it's certainly not that, but it's pieces that I couldn't use to build skiffs that require big, long planks. The last skiff that I built, the V-bottom skiff, took 24-foot planks. Well, these planks are very good, but there's probably something wrong so that they're not 24 feet long. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to prep these planks up into narrower pieces, the best of it, to make the transom for Orca. Now I'm going to double plank that transom, and I'm going to feed this stuff through a planer once I get it sized, and I'm going to put 2 layers of 3/4 inch Atlantic white cedar on the transom of Orca. So this is what I'm up to. I'm going to start prepping up this lumber. I'm going to grab a piece like this, drag it up to me, and I'm looking at it, and you know, it's got checking on the very ends here and there, so basically I'm going to lop off about 1 foot of it with a chainsaw here. Just like that. Now, I'm going to drag it right out. Dump my sticks where I can get at them. Drag it right out here. Let's get a tape measure going here. So I'm going to drag out my tape here, and I'm going to mark it at 12 feet, which is a little bit longer than you might think. 12 feet way up in here. And just mark it with my thumbnail. And lop the other end of it off. Now the transom may not be 12 feet, but I don't think I have much use for the scrap that I've cut off, so rather than cut it down to like 10'6" or whatever the transom might be, I'm just going to process it at 12 feet. So once I've got it cut to length, I'm just going to pick it up and bring it inside where I can rip it. Set it right here. Now, skill saw down below here, out of the way. So now the next thing for me to do is to straighten one edge. Now, how do you straighten one edge? I don't know. You know, you could take a line and snap a line on it and follow the line with a skill saw, I suppose. There's a bunch of ways of doing it, but probably the easiest way to do it is to just put another straight edge on top of it. I think I gotta flip this piece over. I am gonna take like 6 inches or so out of this side. This is all quarter sawn on this side. In other words, the annual rings are going through it this direction here, and that is really desirable. The rest of it is slab sawn, and it's got some problems. You see where I couldn't use it for a skiff. It's got some checking in it and different things like that. So basically, I'm going to take a 6 inch or 6.5 inch piece out of this side of it right here. So I'm just going to clamp this down on here. We do it just like that. All right, now I'm going to use these vice grip clamps to clamp it down. I don't really have to use anything any more powerful. It doesn't need a whole lot of pressure. It just needs something to hold it still there. We're going to put 3 of them on it, 1 on each end and 1 in the middle. I could use any kind of clamp, but the vice grip clamps stay out of your way pretty good, and they're fast, so I like that. So now Let me take my little rip fence off the circular saw here. And this is about how easy this is to do. Like that. Get rid of my scrap, like so. All right, now I'm just going to rip it so it's not quite so wide, and I'm not going to necessarily size it to any particular size that I want. I just want to square edge it on both edges and get a little bit narrower for throwing it through the planer. Like that. Rid of the scrap. There's another piece to put through the planer. So I'm just going to pick the pieces up and take them over and put them through the planer. Let's go over that way and show you what's going on over here. All right. Well, now that I've got a piece ripped out, and you know, I've got 3 or 4 pieces ripped out already, I'm going to throw one piece through the planer and just plane it down to a thickness. I'm basically just going to clean it up. I'm not going to try to size it to any particular size. I think I'll do that all at one time right before I go to plank the transom. So basically what I'm doing here is just cleaning them up, you know, and if they're a little cupped or whatever else, this planer will just take all that right out, and then it's been out in the weather some. It's had some wet surfaces, you know, so basically that dampness is only soaked into the very surface. It's not through the whole plank. So when I plane it, it's going to be planing most of that dampness right off of it. So let me show you how I go about this. Now, here's my little Boise crane planer that I bought here quite some time ago. I can't tell you even where I got it or anything, but I'll tell you what, it's a nice little piece of equipment, and I'll show you how I'm going to go about using it. First off, let me find some juice here, and this piece of equipment doesn't even have a switch on it, so it's going to come on when I plug it in. And I just wanted to tell you that you're probably going to see me doing something a little different than most people do. Like on a planer like this, especially with pieces that are only this long, you don't really need an outfeed table or an infeed table or anything. You just handle it by hand, and just pick it up, put it in about halfway through, you go around the other side and take it out. So that's pretty much it. But to start, I'm actually going to put the piece of wood through the planer about halfway through, and then crank the planer up until it starts planing. You know, I don't know if I've ever seen anybody else do this, but that's the way I do it, because I don't want to measure, you know, I don't want to measure the board. I don't need to know how thick it is. I don't need to know where the planer is set. I don't need to know anything like that. All I need to do is put it in and crank it up until it planes. So here we go. right, I'm over at my table saw here, and I'm going to rip this piece of cedar down. I've got some slab sawn area on this side of the board, and it's got some checking and some different things. So I basically want this side because this is nice and quarter sawn. This is a nice piece of material other than this edge. So I'm going to rip it down here. But before I do that, I just wanted to talk to you just a tiny bit about my little area right here. You know, I call this like a power cluster. You know, I've got a table saw right here. I've got 2 surface planers right here, my bandsaw, and a joiner. And I can use them all in this little area right here. This is great because, you know, equipment like this notoriously takes up an awful lot of space. And if you put it in the wrong place in your shop, never mind does it take up space, but you can't even use it. So I need it to be out in the middle of the floor because I need space on both sides of everything because I got some relatively long pieces that I process once in a while, and that's the way it has to be. Actually, what's going to happen, I'm going to improve all of this actually. I'm going to move the table saw over right about in here, and it's going to be kind of optional. I'll be able to use it on a diagonal through the shop in this direction, or I can just twist it a little bit and rip in this direction. So that's the table saw. And the bench planer right over here is the same thing out in the middle of the room. That's easy to move with a pallet jack, and my bandsaw is on wheels. So basically, I've got what? 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got 5 pieces of equipment clustered together in this one little area. This piece shoots over the top of that piece, and the joiner shoots over the top of the table saw, and the bandsaw shoots over the top of the joiner, and you know, it's a pretty interesting little area right here. I thought I'd set it up kind of quickly. I had this idea and put it to use and see if I really like it, because basically, I want to try to make it a little bit more permanent because I'm going to have a dust collection system put in and all kinds of different things. So, you know, it's going to get pretty crowded in here. You know, notoriously, boats take up quite a bit of space in a shop. So I'm going to bring my 34-foot L. Francis Herreshoff auxiliary catch into this spot over here, just backing it right in the door. And we're going to be lofting and building Orca in the background, right in the back of the shop back there. So, you know, yeah, the use of the space is very important. And this is, like I say, a little bit of an experimental situation, but so far I kind of like it. I don't want the table saw over near the wall where you have to clean off the entire bench in order to use it or anything else. I probably am going to set up a cutoff saw over in this area, and wherever we're going to put the power source for the dust collection system, I haven't figured that out yet, but you know, it's coming together, I think. So, you know, I was talking about the planer just a little while ago and saying that I didn't need an outfeed table on the planer. I'm doing this stuff by myself, so I don't have help. You know, I don't have somebody to grab the other end of the board or do anything like that. I have to be able to do it by myself. And it's not going to be done that way all along. But right now, that's the situation I'm in. I'm alone working, so I have to be able to make it work by myself. The planer, I didn't need an outfeed table, whether it's outfeed or infeed or otherwise. I've got methods of using that equipment without having to have an outfeed table. The table saw's a little bit different situation because, you know, I have to stay on this side of it. You know, I have to stay over in this position in order to push the lumber through. So as it comes out the other side, if it gets too heavy, what happens is it just droops right down. And I don't have a bench or something, so what I do is set up like just a temporary, very, very temporary little outfeed sled or slide here for the planking to go out on as I rip it. So basically, I'm just going to start the saw up and rip this one piece. There you have it. Well, I got something I really wanted to show you here. It's in the middle, really, of fitting these pieces for the transom of Orca together. These are going to be the top layer of pieces that are going to go on the transom. They're quarter sawn, which just means that the annual rings are going through it in this direction here. You know, edge grain or quarter sawn. And the idea of that is to, you know, so that it will look a certain way. The transom on Orca had very little character to it whatsoever. You know, the varnished pieces behind the lettering, you know, they don't show any annual rings or anything like that, which just means it's all, you know, quartered material. I don't know what kind of material that was, and I think we're going to have to stain this a little bit to get it up to the same color as the transom of Orca, but, you know, all that's fine. The idea here was to use some nice quality lumber and have it be quarter sawn and have it look like the original. So, you know, basically, I think you've seen me cut these out of a pile of cedar that I had outside, and I've edged it, you know, with a skill saw right here by just following another board and run it through the planer, and it's all different thicknesses right now. I'm going to plane it all to the same thickness before it's over, but right now the idea here is to edge it and get it to fit together. So I wanted to show you how I go about that stuff. And the first thing I wanted to show you was that I'm going to actually clamp the pieces together right here on the bench like this, you know, and see how well they fit. They might have a little bit of an edge set over the length of the plank, but basically they're going to fit. So let me just put a clamp on it real quick here in the center here. You've got to even the planks up with each other. Hang on. A little bit tricky to do. That board wants to be up more. There we go. Yeah. Now, I just wanted to show you that it takes very, very little clamp pressure to pull those pieces together. And they fit for the length pretty well, but I can also put a clamp at the ends like this. So like I say, it takes very, very little clamp pressure to pull these up against each other because, you know, I didn't want to take the edge set out of the pieces completely and make them absolutely perfectly straight to get them to fit, because, you know, as you straighten it and as you deduct material off the edge of any one of these planks, it wants the edge set a little bit more. So, you know, you could be planing there forever trying to get the edges to be perfectly straight. You know, there's no necessity of making it perfectly straight. What they need to do is fit quite well. And like I said, it takes very little clamp pressure to pull them up to fit. Just a little bit like that, just like that. And now if I look at these fits, they're just perfect, all the way down one end to the other. I want to show you how I accomplished that. And I would think that many, many people over different situations, I don't know what they would be, but they might have occasion to have to fit some pieces of wood together like this. And it amounts to having to plane the edges of it. Well, planing the edges of boards like this, as long as this and different things, is not always the easiest thing in the world to do. So I had to develop a method of planing the edges that just works really, really well. It's not a hassle or you know, or hard to do or anything like that. One of the things I have to show you is that one of the alternatives to the way I'm going to do it would be to clamp, you know, one of these wooden clamps down on the bench and set that in between it. Now you've got the thing on edge and you could plane the edges, but the problem with that is that trying to keep the plane at 90 degrees to the edge of the board is not always the easiest thing to do, really, you know, because you're kind of holding on to it yourself. And there's the other problem. As I plane and I want to have two hands on my plane, it just keeps moving the material. I could clamp this clamp down to the bench. It's just a whole bunch of movement. And what I want to be able to do is to plane it a little bit and then fit it a little bit. So I've developed a method here that's going to work for me. The other thing that I tried, and I've tried over the years, is to edge clamp this down with a clamp in this direction, but the same problem. Now the clamp's in your way, right? The board's flapping all over the place. Holding the plane at 90 degrees to the board, it's just not that easy to do. So basically I wanted to develop a technique to plane the edges and get them where they fit, as well as get them nice and straight all at the same time. And basically this is what it amounts to. I've got a couple of planks sitting on the bench right here. I'm going to use the same planks that I use for the transom to be a temporary workbench in a sense. So I've got a couple of planks laying down. I put this one on the top of it like that. This one's hanging out about 3 inches or so, something along those lines. And basically what I want to do is plane the edge of this piece right here. So I'm going to put it on top like that, just hanging out maybe a ½ an inch past the edge of that board right down there. Then I'm going to use a plane, a number 5, very sharp, by the way. And I think that's another video that I'm going to be doing eventually, is showing you how to sharpen one of these planer blades to this extent and get it to be as sharp as this. But basically what I'm going to use is this plank for a slide or a guide. And I'm going to set my plane right down on there like that. It just sits there perfectly 90 degrees to this top plank, is exactly what I'm trying to do. And I'm going to hold on to it with one hand. You know, like I say, if I tried to use 2 hands, it would either just start moving everything on the bench, or it would tip the sawhorses over. Oh, you can have all kinds of trouble. Basically, I'm going to hold the clamp with hold the planks with one hand, hold the plane in my other hand. And I'm going to plane like this. Just like that. Now what happened there was I got a little skidder under my plane, and that is because I didn't practice the second technique that I want to show you, and that is that if you wanted to get a piece, a little shaving off of the edge of this to be full length, one end to the other, without breaking, I might be able to do it. Let me see if I can show you how to do it. Pull back about 3/4 of an inch or a little bit less and start again. Stop, pull back about just a tiny little bit. If you go too far back, you'll end up with that piece between you and the bottom of your plane. So let me try it again here. Just like that. Basically, that's a full length piece shaving all in one shot. Now, this plane that I'm using really is it's a number 5. It's an A5. This one's aluminum. You don't see very many of these. I like this plane, but it does leave a little bit of aluminum oxide behind everywhere you use it. So you have to be careful where you leave that stain. Let's try it again. Yeah, just like that. So that's how that's done. Now, I'm going to take that same piece that I just planed the edge of and move this piece out of the way. And I'm going to take and flip that piece over and pull it up against the next piece and see how well it fits. Well, the tiniest little bit of clamp pressure. Look at that, it's fitting all the way down here. Maybe needs a tiny bit of pressure at the end. Just a little bit. Just like that. Look at that fit. Just as fine as can be. So that's the way that's done. Now, I would think that many people might have an occasion to fit planks like this together. This is a real nice way to go about it because you got two sawhorses, that's it. You're using the same material that you're actually going to fit together as a workbench. But if we were at a woodworking bench and we had a bench vise, it really wouldn't make it that much easier because you still got the same problem. You can clamp the plank on edge, but to get yourself to plane it 90 degrees and full length, it's a little bit difficult. I've never been able to master it, so I do things this way. This technique can be used on a woodworking bench. It can be used for shorter pieces. Any occasion that there is to fit two layers or two pieces of planking together, like say, one example I would say would be like fitting the side planking together when you're building a skiff. You know, you've got a 16-foot to 20-foot length of plank. You know, the two planks want to fit together really nice. This is the way to do it. You know, you can do it with shorter pieces, long pieces, but there's no replacement for this technique right here. The other day, I was looking for this aluminum plane, and I looked in my truck, in the toolboxes, I looked everywhere, and I couldn't find it, and I thought I was going to actually have a heart attack because I've been using this plane a good portion of my life, and it's just nice and light and convenient compared to a steel one. The steel one's quite heavy. Same basic plane, but a little bit different. No, it's just the only one of these I've ever seen, to tell you the truth. I know there's others out there, but I've never seen another one.